All right, here we go. This is lesson 18, y'all. We are moving and grooving. So last lesson, if you haven't checked that one out, that one's powerful, y'all. We went deep into nutrition, one of my favorite topics, and really one of the topics that initiated a lot of this, because I had a lot of challenges with, like most people, like maintaining my weight, figuring out what diet, quote unquote, was going to be the best to support my ability to train and perform at the highest level possible. And a little bit of a backstory, I guess, that I didn't share is I had a real bad fungal infection that I'm still healing from. And that's a lot of what initiated the journey into the whole nutrition realm, and really, just my relationship with food and all of that stuff. And, in the midst of it, it sucked, obviously, but, hindsight, I see it as a really a great blessing, because it forced me to really dive deep into that. And that's really been a theme of my life. And I'm sure many people can relate to where the challenge, the great challenge, or the pain becomes the teacher, and it ultimately becomes the blessing. That's why we call it the pain teacher, is it helps you to grow your awareness, which then there's all these cliche sayings, the mess then becomes the message. The pain then becomes the purpose, because whatever thing that you're going through and you have to really dive deep into, because essentially you're forced to, that then becomes your capacity to share and to serve and to teach others and to help other people that may be experiencing similar things. So I have a very great and deep relationship when it comes to nutrition, because of the struggle that I've had with it and my own physical health, which I then realized was very connected to the mental, emotional, and spiritual side of things, which is why in the nutrition video, the nutrition lesson, I talked about not just physical nutrition, but also mental nutrition, emotional nutrition, and spiritual nutrition, because all of those things, they're all interrelated, and fundamentally it's all the same shit. But I've recognized even more and more that the more I have done the work to manage my mind, to manage my emotions, my thoughts, and the perspectives, the ideas, the stories that I tell myself, and more have aligned to what I feel like I'm here to do, ultimately my purpose, my vision, my dream, it's actually helped in the nutrition side of things. Because as we'll get into today, when it comes to this lesson, lesson 18, which is entitled Dr. Quiet, the balancing of the opposites, a lot of it, well, damn near all of it, has to do with your capacity to handle and manage stress in your life. Because, for instance, going back to nutrition, if you are being exposed to a lot of stress from a lot of different areas, like for instance, the stress that you're just creating for yourself through your own ideas, perspectives, preferences, and your reaction to the circumstances in your life, that's going to be a huge stress, and in my experience can be the biggest stress that people face. Because nowadays we're not actually, most of us at least, we're not actually running from lions physically, but mentally we're running from lions all day, all night. It even shows up in our dreams. That's a good place to, a little bit of a side note there for you. That can be a very powerful awareness tool, is to pay attention to your dreams and see them for what they are, just kind of these unconscious, subconscious unfolding, and very, very symbolic, but they often do point to and give direction to a lot of the fears that we harbor subconsciously, which in turn manifest themselves in our beliefs, our perspectives, and then how we go about interacting with our circumstances in life. So, like I said, most of the stress that we experience nowadays is from the stories that we tell ourselves, and essentially the metaphorical running from a lion all day and all night, every day, for your whole life. Okay? So when it comes to balancing, because like I said, it's being able to manage these different stressors in your life. And as it relates to nutrition, the more, and this is, my own experience here, the more that I have been able to better manage my thoughts and emotions and really be very intentional with the perspectives that I choose, with the stories that I choose to engage and believe in, that then, thought, word, deed, that then reflect themselves in the words that I speak and the actions that I take. The more I have done to, not in the doing is kind of a contradictory term, because paradoxically it's been more of just a letting go, of just a surrendering to just the isness of life, and really not even getting attached to any kind of particular story or framework. But even there too is, it is a story and a framework of surrendering, but that in itself has served me very well, at least right now, where I'm at right now. So the more I've done to just really just let go, the less overall stress there has been on the mind-body complex, if you will. And therefore, I have noticed that my capacity to, one, tolerate, and two, be able to metabolize, assimilate, and eliminate food as it relates to nutrition, I guess the more leniency there has been in that. And, it's very compounding. And like I talked in the nutrition lesson, it's not just something that, you eat some different food one day and then you're good. It's, I talked about the 1 year cycle and the 7 year cycle, how you literally, it takes doing this shit for what we would consider a very long time to really rewire the whole system at even a epigenetic level, a chemical level, to where your body literally, you're rebuilding your cells, you're rebuilding your body. So it kind of has a compounding effect, but through this compounding effect, I have noticed that the more that I've been able to let go of the unnecessary stress that is self-creating, that I just create for myself, the more I've been able to get more out of the food. Like I said, digest, assimilate, and eliminate the nutrition, the food that I have been consuming. And, I do follow the 4-day rotation diet, and I go through different phases. And that's why, we've talked about rhythms and cycles, because even when it comes to managing these different stresses in your life, again, it's not this like you just have these practices, or you kind of put this program into place and then you follow this program and then you're all good. It's noticing the flow, noticing the rhythms, and being able to set the structure to be in line with the natural rhythms and cycles of things. Because for me personally, there are seasons where I'm very, like currently right now, it's like I'm very, I guess, on point and more rigid, depending on how you look at it, with my nutrition. Right now I am on a very like strict 4-day rotation where I do follow it to a T, essentially. And again, it's not this coming from a place of force or will. It's just been a natural flow of, this is where I feel like I'm at right now, and this is what I feel called to follow. And usually, and this is just a pattern that I've noticed, but it could change, but usually once it gets into the fall and the winter season, especially the fall season, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, different holidays that are typically associated with eating a lot of different kinds of foods, then that's usually the time where I'm more lax and I'll allow myself to eat a lot of different kinds of foods and, what we would consider indulge into different things. And again, it's just a natural outpouring. And so part of being able to create this structure and managing the different stresses in your life, like I said, is also being able to notice and align things to these rhythms. Okay. So that's why there's a whole lesson on that, because you'll see that begins to come in more and more and more. And once you recognize that, and once you're able to align to that, then all of these different pieces, they have their place in different ways at different times and different circumstances. Because again, like I said, it's not just you have this one program that here's the program and you just follow the program for the rest of your life and you're good. Although underlying like the big overarching program, yes, but that big overarching program involves changing the micro programs, the little program within the program, to be in line with all of the different, the seasons, the rhythms, your circadian rhythm, which is the day-night rhythm, like all these different cycles. Because again, we're just aligning to nature. Nature doesn't just do one thing and it just keeps on doing that thing. It's not a perpetual summer or a perpetual spring or a perpetual fall or a perpetual winter. As we all know, if you just use common sense, that wouldn't work. So nature has these rhythms, and we are a product and extension of nature. It's where we came from, whether you like it or not, is where we came from. Okay? And therefore, we operate under the same principles. All right? But then underlying, like behind it all, and really transcending and including it all, is just the archetypal theme of just nature itself, of just this flow itself. Okay? So Dr. Quiet, and in the name it implies it's quiet. So it has to do at a surface level with rest, with your sleep cycles, with your the time that you're taking for introspection, to really just be with yourself, like the opposite of doing. That's where these opposites are going to start coming in here. But as I've really worked with this, it's become much more than just your sleep cycle, for instance, or the time that you meditate. Like all of those things are included within that, but all of those things are in relation to the opposite. Because just in the same way that you can over-exercise or overdo yourself and exhaust yourself and create a surplus of yang energy, masculine energy, if you will, like going out and just doing things, like summer, like where it's just hot, and then you burn yourself up. Just in the same way that you can do that, you can also do it in the opposite, where it would be now, there's too much yin. There's a yin surplus, which if you want to be technical, and this is more, I think, like Ayurvedic kind of medicine concepts, but there can be a surplus and a deficit, either individually or in conjunction. So you can have a yang surplus, or you can have a yin deficit. And the same thing, you can have a yin surplus, and or you can have a yang deficit. So that's a little bit more of a technical thing, but just something to be mindful of. Okay. So either way, just to keep it simple, just as much as you can have a yang surplus and you're doing too much, you can have a yin surplus and you're not doing enough. This is like you're sleeping too much. And honestly, what I have noticed is, I guess if I had to just label one of the primary challenges that I see is, that's a good question. Because what we're seeing now, because obviously, like, most people, at least in America, most people are fat, and having a surplus amount of fat is associated with, it's a cumulative thing, and yin is cumulative. But on the other side of that, when your body is under stress, that too can lead to a cumulative response. Okay. So this is where, but if you understand just the basics of the concept of balance, then you can know how to think about these things, just like I'm doing right now. Because at a physiological level, when your liver is overburdened with, your liver has a lot to do with processing and eliminating toxins from the body. When your liver is overburdened, it shuttles the toxins into fat cells, basically as a survival mechanism. It's just like, it's too much work. I don't know what to do with this. So out of survival, it shuttles into fat cells. And then, a little tidbit for you, if you're dealing with cellulite issues, and then when the fat cells are overburdened with toxins, out of a survival mechanism, the body draws water as essentially a buffer for the toxins. And that's where a lot of times, that's where you'll experience the cellulite. Because, if you've ever really paid attention, and I know, like, I've had this experience, because there's a big difference between, and this is a little bit of a digression, but we'll tie it back in. There's a big difference between when you're fat because you're toxic, and really if you see somebody, like if I were to show you two different people that fit the bill of what I'm about to describe, you would notice the difference here. But there's a big difference between being fat because you're toxic, and what it would be essentially a yang surplus that has led to a counterbalance of yin. Okay. And then on the other side of that, if you're fat, just because you simply have, just an over accumulation, and it's not necessarily like you're toxic, but there's just an over accumulation. And this would be more, like when a bear goes into is about to go into hibernation, and it just builds its reservoir up of body fat to be able to have something to draw upon for the duration of the hibernation. Or if you've ever, most people imagine like Buddha, like the stereotypical, if you think of a Buddha, and it's like this kind of big fat dude looking like a statue that we associate with that, even though Buddha, like Christ, is really it's a title. It's not an actual person. But either way, just that image that comes to mind typically, that would be more of an over accumulation in the yin sense, where there's just not a lot of activity, and so there's just an over accumulation of energy, which at times, and this is like being fat isn't necessarily a bad thing, because at times, and even like a woman during pregnancy, at times it is helpful to have an over accumulation. And you could even, in some schools of thought, it's even labeled as a good thing. And this is why, there is a lot of what we would consider, like masters or like sages that are like fat, because it was something that is revered, something that was considered a positive thing, because it indicated an accumulation of life force energy. All right. So again, that's a little bit of a digression, but I just wanted to make the point that there can be different expressions of even very similar things, but on completely opposite end of the spectrum. So what we're experiencing, and what, again, especially in America, is more on the yang accumulation that has swung and created a yin response. Okay. And it's the same principle that we use in conventional livestock practices, conventional agriculture practices, when you're trying to just like beef up a cow, is you just feed it a bunch of bullshit and it accumulates fat, which it makes it bigger, makes it way more, but it makes it less and less healthy. All right. So that's what we're experiencing. So kind of back on the main train here. When it comes to Dr. Quiet, the basic principle is being able to, one, recognize the interplay of the opposites, and then two, being able to align and essentially consciously direct that interplay, that flow, that pendulum swinging back and forth. And again, if you just look at nature, you will get a very good teaching of what this looks like in real life. It's just even within a day. It's day, it's light, it's light, it's light. There's a peak amount of light. The sun's at its highest point, and then it starts to descend. It goes down and down and down and down. And then the dawn turns into midday, turns into dusk, and then now it's dark, and then there's a peak darkness, and then the sun, then the things start to come back up. Although obviously, the earth is spinning again, like all these cycles. The earth is spinning, but in itself, and then it's spinning around the sun, and then the galaxy, then the solar system is spinning around the galaxy. And then, if you really wanted to take it big, like the galaxy is essentially in this spinning around the entire universe, which is kind of unfolding itself back into itself. And if you want to dive deeper into just that concept in itself, read Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Itzhak Bentov. And he essentially talks about the interplay of a black hole and a white hole, because the black hole is like ultimate yin. It just sucks everything up. And then on the other side of the black hole, which people are pretty familiar with black holes, but it's like, what happens then? What's on the other side of that? On the other side of the black hole, at least according to Itzhak Bentov, I haven't actually seen this, but once you kind of understand all of these different things, it really does make sense. On the other side of the black hole is a white hole, where it's just like ultimate yang energy, which is just like pushing everything out. And so there's this cycle where it's, the white hole pushes everything out. It's like what do they call that? A torus, I believe is what they call that. It's like it pushes everything out, and then it kind of comes back in on itself as you kind of reach this maximal point of yang energy. And then it comes back in and around itself, and then it gets sucked back into the black hole. So it's literally our entire universe, or at least this universe, however you want to look at that. That's kind of what's going on here. So again, go study that and you'll get a little better understanding. But the cool thing is, once you really understand the principle of the balance, which is essentially the principle that this entire universe operates under, because it's oneness coming to know itself, and essentially a little simple math equation that you can remember. And when it comes to, I call this like divine math, is 0, which is the source, which is simultaneously empty of everything and yet pregnant of everything. It's infinite potential, or God, if you want to say God. Okay, that's 0. And then from the 0 comes the 1. So from infinite potential comes everything, comes the expression of everything. It's just oneness, all that is. Okay, and then the oneness has no way to know itself as oneness. Because if you would imagine, if you just imagine you are as big as the entire universe, paradoxically, you wouldn't know who you are, because you only know who you are in relation to something else. Okay? So it's like you're looking at this video, you identify that you are not this video, or you're listening to this podcast, you identify that is not me, and therefore you can have a relationship. That's how you can even listen to this or watch this right now, is you have a relationship with that. And then that relationship is what provides you with the idea. It's a very important word there, idea, a concept of what you are. So again, if you're everything, if you're all of it, there is no relationship to be had. And so you can't know yourself. And so the only way for the oneness to know itself is to have a relationship. But because it's essentially all in, like oneness is all in balance, there's no relationship, there's no interplay of opposites. So in essence, and by definition, it's all in complete balance. The only way to create the two is to create the illusion of imbalance, because it's still in balance. But that's why, again, that's where all these cycles come in, because you can't have the yin without the yang. And to the extent that there is the yang energy, the masculine energy, or the light, you can put whatever you want there, whatever that yang energy principle is, to the extent there is that is the potential for the yin. So it's like the peak day is also, because we can't have even a label, a concept for peak daylight without the concept, the potential for darkness. Okay. So it's like the peak day only has a importance, only has a, we can only have a concept of that in relation to peak night. Okay. Like midday only makes sense in relation to midnight. Okay. So like I said, once you understand that, so the one creates the illusion of two, which are still, it's always in balance. It's just the illusion of imbalance. So everything is always going to find its way back into balance, but it's never in complete balance. It's just an interplay. It's just an exchange, okay? So it's like, it's hot, 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 and then the hot then potentiates the cold, and then it's cold, 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 and then the cold then potentiates the hot. And if you want to get like really, really, really deep into just that concept, the interplay of the opposites and how that essentially like manifests this entire universe, go study Walter Russell's home study course. And I have, if you're in the Life Collective, I have a resource page where I give, it's all for free. I give you the free PDFs of the whole course. It's like over 1,000 pages long. So you can go check that out. Okay. So when it comes to applying that principle practically in your life, it's, like I said, recognizing where the forces are, where the balance is. And that's why within the program and within this whole system, it builds everything off of these rhythms and cycles. Okay. So that's why we have because right now, for instance, if you're following the training program, we are in the peak year. We are in the peak, or we're about to be in the peak quarter of the peak year. So it's like the yang, the peak of the peak. Although this would be in relation to fall, okay? Because I like to work in the number 4s. That's like the number of completion qualitatively. So it just makes things nice and neat, because essentially what we're doing here is we're literally systematizing. We're creating a scientific approach to a tangible approach to something that is inherently intangible. Basically, we're creating structure that allows the flow, is what we're doing here. Once you recognize that and you can create the structure around the flow, so then you can see where, okay, we're at this peak level right here, and then it's going to be followed by a rest. All right. And again, the same thing with your day. And this is how, like, if you really want to, which is why I haven't even really touched on sleep and like optimizing your sleep and, creating a spiritual practice and all of that. Because this underlying principle, if you just really get this, all the other stuff is easy. All right. Because if you approach your day and you align your day, if we're just talking about a day level here, if you align your day to the circadian rhythm, so that basically means like as the sun's coming up, you get up. And then as, like the peak day is approaching, you can even align your activities. So it's like you're at peak activity during peak day. And this is very individual too, which is why, again, like I'm not just going to sit here and give you just do this, do that. Although I do give you a little bit of that, but it's very individual. And you have to figure out what your own natural rhythms are to be able to install that into the rhythms and the flows and the cycle. But as a principle, peak day is peak activity, and even your hormonal cycles. Like there's a graph in How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy by Paul Chek, where he graphs your hormonal rise and fall, and as it relates to the circadian rhythm. So you have they're called your catabolic hormones, which are your stress hormones, which, stress isn't bad. I've talked about this before. Stress isn't bad. We need stress. Gravity is a stress. You go to the gym, you train, that's a stress. Stress isn't bad. It's just the balancing. Like I said, yang isn't bad. Yin isn't bad. It's the balancing of the opposites. Okay. And then, you have your peak activity and then things start winding down. And then so ideally, as the sun's going down, your day's winding down. And then if you line that up, naturally, you're going to start getting tired. And again, this, it's not just the activity. Well, even though it is, because this is where the nutrition aspect comes back in. Because, if you're running from a lion all day, metaphorically, whether it's the thoughts, you're not properly managing your thoughts and emotions, or the foods that you're actually consuming that aren't right for your body in that moment and in those circumstances, like all these things that could be creating additional stress in the system and therefore increasing the level of catabolic hormones, the stress hormones, then that starts to inhibit your ability to then maximize the anabolic hormones, which are the growth. So, there's the fight or flight system in the autonomic nervous system, and then there's the rest and digest branch of the autonomic nervous system, which that would be associated with your anabolic hormones. All right. So the more stress you add to the system from any and all means, and this is where, again, these things can be complicated, even though the principle's simple, which is why I like to teach the principles. Because if you're overly stimulated on the yang energy, the stress response, your catabolic hormones, in the short term, it has a detrimental effect on the anabolic hormones. And again, in that book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy, he shows you different graphs that shows you what typically happens. Like your stress hormones are up all day. And then therefore, when it comes to actually rest, your anabolic hormones don't have a chance to properly rise. And so you can maximize that capacity, maximize your ability to recover and rest and digest. Okay. So that's usually what happens in the short term. But again, it's all balance here. So if you continue that path after a while, and this is where, as far as like a diagnoses go, this is where you start to run into adrenal fatigue. And again, there's all these different names and shit and terms like that. But essentially what happens is there's stress for a long period of time. And then eventually it gets to a point where the pendulum's going to swing the other way. And then that's where usually you burn out or you injure yourself or something happens. And this could even happen at a spiritual level where you're just like, you don't even know what you're doing with life. And you're, like a midlife crisis. And then in essence, it forces a yang response. And it's like now you're sick, or now you're just completely burned out, depressed, because anxiety is the first step because there's just a lot of shit going on. But then anxiety not properly managed then leads to depression, because then it's just the yang, the anxiety yang, then the pendulum swings, because at a certain point, the candle burns out, okay? And then now you're forced to sit your ass down. And I've experienced that personally, where it's like you try to go, and you just push yourself, and especially in our, the climate of the culture, where it's like grind and hustle and, all these words and verbs, do all this shit, and then you burn yourself out, and then it's like, okay, now you sit your ass down. And so knowing that, you can, instead of just waiting and hoping that, it doesn't happen, even though it is going to happen, and therefore you're just kind of waiting and trying to draw out the inevitable where you're going to get your ass sat down, you can plan for that within the system that you create for your life. And again, we look at a day level here, aligning to the circadian rhythm, and then we look at even a weekly level, and then we look at a monthly level. So we can use all of these built-in structures that we're already accustomed to align and to develop a relationship with the balance, okay? So that's why, again, going on to our training program, there's a time that we intentionally have as rest. And then like things kind of slowly build up, and then they have a peak, and then you rest, and you kind of drop off, you allow for the recovery, and then you can build back up. So it's, it's like the spiral of evolution, or it's the kind of dynamic, like 1 step or 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But the difference is you were intentionally taking the step back, so you don't have to be forced to take multiple steps back because you just keep trying to go. Okay? So if you just take that principle and apply it to all the foundational stuff that you've already implemented, your key processes, the rhythms and the cycles, the divine 9, all the stuff that we've already been through. And by the way, if you're just listening in on this, like, go do the free course, or at least if you're don't even want to go in and do the free course, these podcasts are just out there. Go back to lesson 1 and then build it back up. Okay? So you can really see where all of this fits in now. But in essence, that, at least to me, that is Dr. Quiet. The balancing of the opposites. Just a little recap. Notice that I say notice. Okay? This isn't when you are actively trying to do things, although there is a time and a place for the will to come in, but the more you're actively trying to do things, just notice that language, okay? That in itself can lead to the overdoing. Even if you're trying too hard to create more rest in your life, even that in itself can lead to an imbalance, okay? So again, this is why we go back to the flow. We go back to the rhythms, we align to the rhythms, and we just notice. Because when you notice, it's like we talked about in the nutrition lesson. When you notice, you start to notice the gaps, and you start to notice these different rhythms. And then you can really start to work with that and start to implement that and integrate that into how you structure your days, how you structure your weeks, how you structure your months, how you structure your seasons, how you structure your years, and how you structure your life. Because even within that system, within this structure, and again, this is what I teach you, this is what I'm teaching you right now in the free course, even within that, you are creating space, you're creating time to then make adjustments and further integrate and align. Because things are always changing. That's why this isn't like a rigid thing. Things are always changing. Life circumstances are always changing. As the river's going to the ocean, bro. The river's going to the ocean. So it's happening. Life is lifing. Okay? So it's not trying to like use your will to try to and create all these different structures and rigid things. You're just creating, you're just helping to establish some banks. That's all you're doing. Establish the banks so the current can flow. All right. And the best and most easy way possible. It doesn't have to be hard, bro. So as you engage with this, you will start to notice you just naturally get tired when it's time to get tired and go to bed. You naturally wake up when it's time to wake up. And especially if you're, doing all this other stuff and you've got your key processes, you've identified the life types, you've got your intention, you're doing the life magic manifestation method every day, the RPMs every day, then it's like you're just ready to go. And you don't even really have to think about what to do because it's all just coming as a natural flow of your beingness. Because remember, action necessitates itself through being. Maximize the being to maximize the flow. And so you know which way to go. All right, y'all. Hope that was helpful. I will talk to you very soon. That concludes our lesson for the day. Peace.